The German shepherd's claws scraped against polished oak as he circled the casket for the third time, his amber eyes wild with something beyond grief. Rex, 85 pounds of retired police muscle, suddenly dropped to his belly and pressed his scarred ear against the wood, his entire body going rigid like he'd been struck by lightning. Margaret Henderson, funeral director for 42 years, felt ice shoot through her veins. She'd seen grieving dogs before. This wasn't grief. "Someone needs to control that animal," Harold Miller hissed, checking his Rolex for the fourth time in 10 minutes. The uncle's fingers drummed against his thigh tap, 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 in a rhythm that didn't match the organ music drifting from the speakers. "The cremation is scheduled for noon. We can't have delays." But Rex wasn't listening. The canine's training had kicked in, 11 years of search and rescue protocol overriding everything else. His tail, which had been tucked in sorrow, shot straight up the official alert position every officer in Ohio would recognize. He began to paw at one specific spot on the casket. 3 deliberate scratches. Pause. Head tilt. 3 more scratches. "Jesus Christ," whispered Nathan Brooks from the back row, his hand instinctively moving to where his service weapon used to sit. He knew that pattern. He'd seen it 100 times in earthquake zones, collapsed buildings, avalanche sites. Rex only did that for one reason. The chapel fell silent except for Rex's increasingly frantic whimpers. The dog's whole body trembled as he pressed harder against the wood, his breathing coming in sharp, measured sniffs. Grace Henderson, Evan's elderly neighbor, stood slowly from her pew, her arthritic hands gripping the worn leather of her purse. "That's not grief," she said, her voice cutting through the heavy air. "I've watched that dog for 2 years. That's his working signal." Sarah Williams, still in her hospital scrubs from the night shift, moved toward the casket. As an ER nurse, she'd learned to trust instincts, and right now, every instinct screamed wrongness. The funeral had been arranged in less than 24 hours. The accident report was barely a paragraph long, and Harold Miller had already filed paperwork to become executor of Evan's considerable estate. "Don't touch anything." Harold stepped forward, his face flushing red. "This is a house of God. Show some respect for the dead." But Rex had moved beyond whimpering to a deep, guttural bark that echoed off the chapel's vaulted ceiling. He threw his full weight against the casket's base, then dropped again, ear pressed to the exact same spot. His eyes rolled back, showing white, and his entire body pointed like an arrow toward something inside that box. Nathan Brooks had seen enough. He pulled out his phone, fingers fumbling with the recording button. "Everyone stop moving. Nobody leaves this room. This is ridiculous." Harold's voice pitched higher. "My nephew is dead. The paramedics confirmed it at the scene. The funeral home received a body that was never autopsied." Maggie interrupted, her professional calm cracking. "You insisted on a closed casket. You paid cash. You rushed everything through in less than a day." Her weathered hands found the keys on her belt. "In 40 years, I've never opened a sealed casket during a service. But if that dog—" Rex let out a sound that wasn't quite bark, wasn't quite howl, something primal that made every person in the chapel step back. He stood on his hind legs, massive paws on the casket's edge, and began to dig at the seal where the lid met the base. Blood appeared on the polished wood where his nails split from the force. Sarah rushed forward, her medical training overriding protocol. She pressed her palm flat against the casket's surface, using the same technique she used to detect difficult pulses through clothing and blankets. For 5 seconds. Nothing. Then so faint she almost missed it a vibration. Rhythmic. Impossible. "Oh my God," she breathed, her face draining of color. She turned to Nathan, then to Maggie. "Get your keys. Now." Harold lunged for the funeral director, but Nathan caught him by the arm, his canine handler strength still intact despite 2 years behind a desk. "Sir, you need to sit down. You can't do this." Harold's composed mask finally shattered. "There are laws, regulations. The health department." Rex's bark cut him off sharp. Commanding. The bark of a dog who'd found survivors in rubble, who'd located lost children in forests, who'd never once been wrong in 15 years of service. The dog's entire body pointed at the casket like a loaded weapon, every muscle taut, every sense focused on what lay inside. Maggie's hands shook as she approached with the emergency override key, the one she'd only used twice in 4 decades. As metal met metal. Rex suddenly went silent, his breathing shallow, his eyes locked on the brass lock. The only sound in the chapel was the soft click of tumblers falling into place. "Wait!" Harold screamed, reaching into his jacket pocket. "You don't understand what you're—" His hand emerged holding a medical syringe, the needle still capped, clear liquid visible in the barrel, the same kind of syringe that had been found in Evan's wrecked car, dismissed by the rushing paramedics as part of his emergency medical kit. The chapel froze. Rex's growl dropped to a frequency that vibrated through the floorboards, and inside the casket, unheard by human ears but clear as thunder to a trained canine, came the faintest sound, a heartbeat that shouldn't exist. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. 2 years earlier, autumn leaves scratched against the windows of the Riverside police station like desperate fingers trying to get in. Evan Miller sat in his black funeral suit, the same one he'd worn to bury both parents just 3 days ago, holding a check that trembled between his fingers. $20,000 for the K-9 retirement fund. His mother would have wanted this. She'd always stopped to pet every police dog she met, always donated to the annual K-9 calendar fundraiser. The waiting room smelled of burnt coffee and industrial disinfectant. But underneath lurked something else: leather, gun oil, and the distinct musk of working dogs. Through the reinforced glass door, Evan could hear the distant sounds of training, sharp commands, barking, the thud of paws hitting practice walls. Mr. Miller, Officer Nathan Brooks, appeared, 35 years old, with the kind of weathered hands that spoke of years handling leashes in all weather. "Thank you for coming. Your donation, it means everything to these dogs." Evan stood, his body moving mechanically. Everything had been mechanical since the accident. Wake up, brush teeth, sign papers, eat something tasteless, sleep without dreams, repeat. "Would you like to see where the money goes?" Nathan asked, studying the young man's hollow eyes. "The kennels are just through here." They walked down a corridor lined with photographs: German shepherds in tactical vests, Belgian Malinois mid-jump, officers and their partners at graduation ceremonies. The sound grew louder: metal gates, water bowls clanging, the particular whine of a dog who wanted to work but couldn't. The K-9 facility opened into a wide training area with kennels along one wall. Most were empty. The active dogs were out on patrol or in training. But in the corner kennel, separated from the others, sat a German shepherd who didn't move when they approached. "That's Rex," Nathan said, his voice dropping. 11 years old, best nose in 3 states, maybe the whole Midwest. 15 years of service: drugs, bombs, earthquakes, missing persons. Found 43 people alive in collapsed buildings. Testified in over 200 court cases just by being present. Rex sat in perfect position, his black and tan coat still glossy despite the gray creeping around his muzzle, but his amber eyes stared at nothing, focused on some invisible point beyond the chain link. "What happens to him now?" Evan asked. Nathan's jaw tightened. "His handler died 6 months ago. Heart attack on duty. Rex was there. Tried to wake him up for an hour before backup arrived. Since then," he gestured at the dog's stillness, "won't work with anyone else, won't play, barely eats. The department says he's too old for retraining, too trained for civilian adoption." A tag on Rex's kennel caught the afternoon light. "Retired, pending placement, 30 days remaining." 30 days until what? Evan's voice cracked for the first time since the funeral. Nathan couldn't meet his eyes. "Department policy. If we can't place retired dogs who might be liability risks due to their training, it's humane. He's not suffering." "Exactly. But he's not living either." Evan stared at Rex, and for a moment, he saw himself breathing but not living, existing in a space between loss and whatever came next. His hand moved without conscious thought, reaching toward the kennel. "I wouldn't," Nathan started to warn. Rex hadn't let anyone touch him since his handler's death. But Rex's head turned, slow and deliberate, like a turret acquiring a target. His amber eyes locked onto Evan's brown ones, and something shifted in the air between them. The dog stood, his movements still carrying the fluid grace of a working canine despite his age. He walked to the kennel door, sat, and did something Nathan had never seen him do with a civilian. Rex lifted his right paw and placed it against the chain link, exactly where Evan's hand rested on the other side. The training area fell silent. Even the other dogs seemed to sense something significant happening. Rex's eyes never left Evan's face, and in them was a question, a recognition, a shared understanding of what it meant to lose the person who gave your life meaning. "He's never," Nathan whispered. "In 15 years, I've never seen him choose someone like that." Evan's tears came then, sudden and shocking after days of numbness. They rolled down his cheeks as Rex pressed harder against the fence, a low whine building in his throat, not of distress, but of recognition. Two souls identifying their matching wounds. "Can I?" Evan's voice broke completely. "Can I go in?" Nathan was already reaching for his keys. "We're not supposed to, but..." He looked at Rex, whose tail had begun the slightest wag, barely visible but there. "Hell, yes." The gate swung open with a metallic shriek. Evan stepped inside, his expensive funeral shoes incongruous on the rubber matting. He knelt, and Rex approached not with the explosive energy of a younger dog, but with the measured dignity of a professional who'd seen everything. When Rex sat directly in front of him, Evan felt the weight of the dog's paw on his knee heavy, warm, real. Without thinking, he placed his hand over it, and Rex leaned forward, pressing his broad forehead against Evan's chest, right where his heart hammered with something that wasn't quite grief anymore. "Jesus," Nathan breathed. "He's choosing you. After 6 months of nothing, he's choosing you." Evan's mother had left him everything: the house, the investments, the fortune his Uncle Harold constantly asked about. But sitting in that kennel with Rex's weight against him, Evan realized she'd also left him this moment, this choice, this chance to save something that needed saving. "What do I need to sign?" Evan asked, his first clear sentence in days. Nathan was already pulling out his phone, calling the department administrator. "Stay right there. Don't move. I need witnesses for this." He paused at the kennel door. "Mr. Miller, you should know Rex is highly trained. Protection, detection, tracking. He knows 47 distinct commands. He's not a pet. He's a retired officer." Rex's tail wagged harder, thumping against the kennel wall with a rhythm that sounded like hope. But then his ears swiveled toward the parking lot, his body tensing with the hyper-vigilance that had made him legendary. Through the window, a black sedan had pulled up, and Harold Miller was getting out, his phone pressed to his ear, his face twisted with anger. Rex's growl was so low Evan felt it more than heard it, vibrating through the paw still resting on his knee. Present day, 8:30 a.m. The morning sun had climbed high enough to strike the brass casket handles, turning them into bars of golden fire. Rex hadn't moved from his position at the casket's base for 90 minutes, but his body told a different story with each passing second, muscles bunching and releasing under his black and tan coat, creating ripples of tension that Nathan Brooks could read like words on a page. Harold Miller's cologne filled the chapel with synthetic pine and something else underneath medicinal, sharp, like the disinfectant used in hospital morgues. He stood too close to Maggie Henderson, the funeral director, his breath coming in short bursts that didn't match the calm expression he wore like a mask. "This is becoming a circus," Harold said, his voice carrying the forced authority of someone used to boardrooms, not grief. "The dog needs to be removed, now. The cremation is scheduled for noon, and I have estate lawyers waiting at 1. Evan's affairs won't settle themselves." Rex's ears swiveled toward Harold's voice, but his eyes never left the casket. His breathing had changed in the last 10 minutes, no longer the deep, steady rhythm of a resting dog, but quick, measured sniffs. Nathan recognized it immediately, scent processing. Rex was working, even if no one had given him a command. "Mr. Miller?" Maggie's keys jangled nervously on her belt as she shifted her weight. "Perhaps we should postpone." "Absolutely not." Harold pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages with one thumb. "Everything is arranged. The medical examiner signed off. The insurance companies have been notified. Do you have any idea what it cost to delay these proceedings? Every hour matters." Grace Henderson, no relation to Maggie despite the shared surname, stood from her pew with the careful dignity of her 70 years. "That dog lived with Evan for 2 years. He has a right to say goodbye. It's an animal," Harold snapped. "It doesn't have rights. It doesn't understand death." Rex's muscles coiled tighter. Nathan watched the dog's tail, which had been hanging low, begin to rise incrementally, degree by degree, like a flag being raised on a pole. In his 15 years as a canine handler, Nathan had seen that exact progression 1,000 times. It always preceded an alert. "Actually," Sarah Williams spoke from her position near the casket, her scrubs still bearing the faded stains of a 36-hour shift. "Studies show dogs understand death quite well. They grieve, they mourn. I don't care what studies show." Harold's composure cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "I'm the executor of this estate, and I say the dog goes. Now." Rex's claws clicked against the wooden floor as he shifted position for the first time in an hour, not away from the casket, closer. He pressed his entire body length against the oak, his spine rigid, his breathing so shallow Nathan could barely see his ribs move. Then, slowly, deliberately, Rex began to circle the casket counterclockwise, his nose working in a pattern Nathan recognized from crime scenes. "Grid search," Nathan whispered to Sarah. "He's doing a grid search pattern." Harold heard him. "What?" "It's how they're trained to process a scene systematically. Every inch, every angle, every—" Nathan stopped, his blood chilling. "He's not grieving. He's investigating." The morning sun shifted, sending a beam directly through the stained glass window depicting St. Francis with the animals. The light painted Rex in blues and golds, making him look otherworldly as he completed his circle and returned to the exact same spot, the lower left corner of the casket, about 18 inches from the base. "Get him out!" Harold's voice rose to nearly a shout. "I don't care if you have to call animal control. Get him!" Rex's growl started so low that the elderly mourners felt it in their hearing aids before they heard it with their ears. It wasn't aggressive, it was warning, the kind of sound that had made criminals freeze in place during arrests. His lips pulled back just enough to show the white of his canines, still sharp despite his age. "Don't," Nathan warned Harold, who had started moving toward the dog. "That's not a pet sound. That's a working dog's warning. He's protecting something." "Protecting?" Harold laughed, but it came out strangled. "There's nothing to protect. Evan is dead. The paramedics confirmed it at the scene. No pulse, no breathing, pupils fixed and dilated. You can't protect a corpse." Rex's head snapped toward Harold at the word corpse, and for a moment, everyone in the chapel saw what 43 rescued earthquake victims had seen: a dog who wouldn't give up, wouldn't accept the obvious, wouldn't stop working until he found what others had missed. Maggie's hand found her keys again, fingers running over them like rosary beads. "In 40 years, I've seen a lot of grieving animals, but I've never seen one act like it's still on duty." "Because he is," Grace said softly, remembering all the times she'd watched Rex and Evan together. Evan used to joke that Rex never really retired, that he was just on permanent assignment as Evan's guardian. Said the dog would check the house 3 times every night, would taste Evan's food before letting him eat, she stopped, her face paling, would always alert if something was wrong. Rex had returned to his original position but now stood on his hind legs, front paws on the casket's edge. His nose worked furiously over one specific area, and his whining had taken on a quality that made everyone lean forward, not mournful, urgent. "Somebody video this," Nathan said suddenly, pulling out his own phone. "Document everything. The dog's behavior, the time, everyone present." "This is ghoulish," Harold protested, but sweat had broken out on his forehead despite the chapel's cool air. "You're turning my nephew's funeral into a spectacle." Rex dropped back to all fours and did something that made Nathan's knees weak. The dog sat in perfect attention, the position he'd been trained to hold when he'd found something important, and lifted his right paw to point at the casket. Not a general gesture, but specific, trained, professional. The same point he'd used in court testimonies, the one that had led to over 200 convictions. "He's indicating," Nathan breathed. "That's an official indication." Sarah moved closer, her medical training overriding social protocol. She placed both hands on the casket's surface, spreading her fingers wide. "Everyone be quiet. Absolutely quiet." The chapel fell silent except for the sound of morning traffic outside and the distant hum of the crematorium warming up in the funeral home's basement. Sarah closed her eyes, using the same technique she used to find veins in difficult patients, to detect the faintest pulse through layers of clothing during trauma calls. Rex watched her intently, his pointing paw trembling with the effort of holding position. 30 seconds passed, 40. Then Sarah's eyes flew open, and she looked directly at Harold. "When exactly did the paramedics declare him dead?" she asked, her voice deadly quiet. Harold's phone slipped from his fingers, clattering on the wooden floor. The sound echoed through the chapel like a gunshot, and Rex, still pointing, began to bark sharp, rhythmic. The cadence every canine handler in the state knew meant one thing survivor found: 2 years of mornings. The first night Rex came home, he slept by the front door like a sentry who'd forgotten he was off duty. Evan found him there at 3 a.m., curled on the cold tile, ears twitching at every sound from the street. The expensive dog bed from PetSmart sat untouched in the corner of the living room, tag still attached. "You don't have to guard anymore," Evan whispered, sitting on the floor beside him. Rex opened one amber eye but didn't move. "I know the feeling, though. Can't quite believe the war's over." By the third night, Rex had migrated to the hallway outside Evan's bedroom. By the 7th, he was beside the bed, his breathing syncing with Evan's in the darkness. On the 14th night, a thunderstorm rolled through Riverside, and Evan woke to find 90 pounds of German Shepherd pressed against his back, trembling not from fear but from the effort of holding himself still, trying not to take up too much space. "It's okay," Evan said, rolling over to face those amber eyes that glowed in the lightning flashes. "There's room." From that night forward, Rex claimed the left side of the bed, always the left, always facing the door, always ready. Their morning routine developed like a dance neither had to learn. Rex would wake at 5:47 a.m. precisely, 3 minutes before Evan's alarm. A cold nose to the hand, gentle but insistent. Coffee brewing while Rex performed his self-assigned perimeter check of the house windows, doors, that corner of the basement where mice sometimes scratched. By 6:15, they'd walk the neighborhood loop, Rex carrying the newspaper in his mouth with the dignity of a butler, never leaving teeth marks on the plastic wrapper. "Drop," Evan would say at the kitchen table, and Rex would place the paper perfectly beside the coffee mug. It became their joke, Evan teaching Rex civilian commands in place of his canine ones. Shake instead of search, speak instead of alert. But sometimes Evan would practice the real commands Nathan had written down, and Rex would snap into professional mode, his whole body changing, becoming the officer he'd always been. "Fass," Evan said one morning, the Russian attack command some K9 units used. Rex froze, muscles coiling. "Just kidding. Easy, boy. Easy." Rex relaxed but gave him a look that clearly said, "Don't joke about the job." Winter came early that year. December brought ice storms that knocked out power for 3 days. They sat by the fireplace, Rex's head heavy on Evan's lap while Evan really talked for the first time since his parents' death. They were coming back from visiting me at college, Evan told the darkness beyond the firelight. If I hadn't insisted they come for parents' weekend, if I'd driven to them instead. Rex shifted, pressing his forehead against Evan's stomach, a steady pressure that said, "I'm here. Keep going." The truck that hit them, the driver had fallen asleep. 3 seconds. That's what the accident investigators said. 3 seconds of drift across the median. Rex's tail thumped once against the floor, acknowledgement, not dismissal. His eyes never left Evan's face as tears fell, salting the fur where Evan's fingers clutched. "Uncle Harold says I should sell this house. Says it's too big for one person. Says Mom and Dad would want me to move forward with my life. But this is where their coffee cups still sit in the cupboard, where Mom's reading glasses are still on the mantel, where Dad's slippers are still under his chair." Evan's voice broke. "I'm not ready to let go." Rex stood, shook himself, and walked to the mantel. With surgical precision, he picked up the reading glasses in his mouth and brought them to Evan, placing them gently in his lap. Then he curled back up, his body saying, "We keep what matters. We guard what's precious." Spring brought healing in unexpected ways. They discovered Rex's joy in being useful again during a hike at Riverside Nature Reserve. A family had lost their 5-year-old's teddy bear somewhere along the 3-mile trail. Rex's ears perked at the child's crying. "Find," Evan said, not really expecting anything. But Rex's entire demeanor transformed. He cast about in widening circles, nose to the ground, tail flagging. 17 minutes later, he emerged from a thicket with a muddy teddy bear held gently in his jaws. The child's shriek of joy made Rex's tail wag so hard his whole back end moved. He was smiling, Evan told Grace over the fence that evening. I swear Rex was actually smiling. They started volunteering with the local search and rescue team on weekends. Not official capacity, Rex was retired. After all but demonstrations for schools, helping find lost hikers, showing kids what working dogs could do, Rex would perform his old routines with an energy that belied his age, then collapse in the car afterward, satisfied. "You're giving him purpose again," Nathan said, watching Rex demonstrate a building search at the police academy. "And he's doing the same for you." Summer evenings became their sacred time. The hill behind Evan's house offered a view of the entire valley, and they'd sit there as the sun turned everything gold, Rex off-leash but never straying more than 10 feet away, always circling back to check, always choosing closeness over freedom. "You could run," Evan said one evening, watching Rex investigate an interesting smell. "Nothing's holding you here." Rex looked back at him, then deliberately walked over and sat pressed against Evan's side, his weight solid and warm and permanent. By the second autumn, they'd developed a language beyond words. Rex knew when Evan's nightmares were coming would wake him with a gentle paw before they took hold. Evan knew when Rex's arthritis was acting up would massage the old dog's hips before he even started limping. They shared meals. Rex had developed a taste for scrambled eggs. They shared silence. They shared the slow reconstruction of two lives that had been shattered in different ways. "He's not the same dog," Nathan observed during a visit. "And you're not the same kid who walked into that kennel." It was true. Evan had gained 15 pounds of healthy weight. Rex's coat gleamed. Both had lost that hollow look around the eyes, that constant vigilance against more loss. The last photo Grace took of them together was on Thanksgiving, 3 days before Evan's accident. They were on the couch, Evan reading, Rex's head on his chest, both completely relaxed. She'd captioned it, "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's fur and devotion." 28 hours later, Harold Miller would stand in that same living room, trying to convince a shocked Grace that Rex needed to be put down for his own good, since Evan was gone. Rex had growled from his position by Evan's empty chair, not mourning. Grace realized now. But warning. Because Rex knew something everyone else had missed. Death has a specific scent, and Evan didn't smell like death at all. Present day. 9:00 a.m. Rex's body transformed in an instant. The grieving dog vanished, replaced by Canine Officer Rex. Badge number 247. 11 years of muscle memory overriding everything else. He dropped to his belly with trained precision, the thud reverberating through the chapel's old wooden floor like a drumbeat of purpose. Nathan Brooks had seen Rex work dozens of times during joint operations, but nothing prepared him for this moment watching a retired dog, supposedly past his prime, become the weapon he'd been forged to be. Rex's breathing changed from emotional panting to controlled, measured sniffs. His nose worked in a specific pattern, 3 quick inhalations. Pause. Process. Repeat. "Everyone needs to be absolutely silent," Nathan commanded, his voice carrying the authority of his badge even though he'd been behind a desk for 2 years. "Nobody move. Nobody speak." Rex pressed his left ear, the one with the scar from a drug dealer's knife, against the casket's base. His entire body went rigid, tail straight out behind him like an arrow. Front paws spread for stability. The position was textbook perfect, exactly as he'd been trained at the Federal Canine Academy in Alabama 15 years ago. Harold Miller's face had gone from red to white. "This is insane. You're all being manipulated by a confused animal. Evan is dead. The paramedics confirmed it. Core temperature dropping. No cardiac activity for 40 minutes. Shut up," Sarah Williams said sharply, dropping to her knees beside Rex. Her hands trembled as she placed them flat against the oak. "In the ER, we sometimes get patients in hypothermic states that mimic death. The saying is, they're not dead until they're warm and dead." Rex's tail began to move, not wagging, but tracking, the way it did when he was triangulating a scent source. He shifted position by exactly 6 inches, pressed his ear to a new spot, and his whole body started to vibrate with contained energy. Then he did something that made Nathan's blood run ice cold. Rex assumed position 7 survivor detected, condition critical. It was the rarest of all canine signals, used only when the dog detected life signs so faint that any delay could mean death. Nathan had seen it exactly 3 times in his career, once during an earthquake rescue, once in a collapsed mine, and once when they found a kidnapped child buried in a wooden box. "He's indicating survivor status," Nathan breathed. "Critical survivor status." Maggie Henderson's weathered hand shook as she pulled the chapel's master keys from her belt. "In 40 years, I've never—" "There's no time," Sarah interrupted, her medical training taking over. "If Rex is right, if there's even a chance hypothermia, drug-induced coma, catalepsy, we have minutes, maybe seconds." Rex rose from his position and began his alert bark, 3 sharp barks. Pause. 3 more. But these weren't his normal bark. These were pitched higher, more desperate. The bark he'd used only once before, when he'd found a child in a collapsed storm cellar with minutes of air remaining. Grace Henderson clutched her chest, tears streaming down her 70-year-old face. "Dear God, he's trying to save him, just like Evan saved him." The chapel erupted in chaos. 2 elderly mourners were calling 911. Others pressed forward, drawn by morbid curiosity and desperate hope. Harold tried to block Maggie's approach to the casket, but Nathan stepped between them, his body language making it clear that interference wouldn't be tolerated. "You don't understand," Harold's voice cracked with something beyond panic. "The estate, the timing, everything depends on Evan being dead," Sarah finished, her eyes blazing. "Mr. Miller, what exactly did you do?" Rex's barking had stopped. Instead, he'd done something even more chilling. He'd assumed the position every canine handler dreaded. Silent point. Frozen completely still. Nose aimed at one specific spot on the casket. It meant one thing: time was running out. Sarah pressed her ear to the wood where Rex indicated. For 5 seconds. Nothing. 10 seconds. Then, so faint she almost missed it, a vibration that shouldn't exist. Rhythmic. Possibly mechanical. Possibly. "There's something," she whispered. "I can't tell if it's weight." She pressed harder, using the technique she'd learned for detecting pneumothorax through layers of clothing. "Oh my God," It's not mechanical. It's biological. It's... Rex exploded into action, leaping against the casket with his full weight, clawing at the seal where the lid met the base. Blood appeared on the polished wood where his nails split, but he didn't stop. His whines had become almost human in their desperation. "Open it," Nathan ordered Maggie. "Now." "The health department," Harold started. "Will understand when we explain a certified canine detected signs of life." Nathan cut him off. "Unless you want to explain why you're preventing us from potentially saving your nephew's life." Harold's hand moved to his jacket pocket. The same motion he'd made before when he'd revealed the syringe. This time, several people noticed. "Keep your hands where we can see them," Nathan said quietly. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step back." Maggie inserted the override key with shaking fingers. The lock clicked open with a sound like breaking bones. Rex immediately pressed his nose to the crack where the lid met the base, inhaling deeply, then pulled back with a violent sneeze as if he'd scented something chemical. Wrong. Dangerous. "Drugged," Nathan said with sudden certainty. "Rex is indicating drugs. He's scenting something that shouldn't be there." Sarah's medical mind raced. Propranolol can slow heart rate to almost nothing. Combined with a paralytic and a sedative, someone could appear dead for hours, but the window for recovery without brain damage is closing, Grace finished, remembering her late husband's medical textbooks. Every minute without proper oxygen. Rex had gone beyond desperate. He was actually crying high, keening sounds that no one in the chapel had ever heard from a dog. His paws scrabbled at the casket lid, leaving bloody prints on the brass handles. He looked at Nathan, at Sarah, at anyone who would listen, his amber eyes holding an intelligence that transcended species. "Help me save him. Please." "Everyone stand back," Maggie commanded with sudden authority. She gripped the lid with both hands, her arthritis forgotten. "On 3, 1. Harold lunged forward. "You can't. The insurance, the will, everything is already..." Nathan caught him mid-motion, using a restraint hold he hadn't practiced in years. "Sir, you need to stop moving. Now." 2, Maggie continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Rex positioned himself at the head of the casket, ready to be the first thing Evan saw when his eyes opened. The dog's entire body trembled with contained energy, every muscle ready to spring into action. 3. The lid lifted with a soft hydraulic hiss from the vacuum seal breaking. Morning light flooded into the silk-lined interior, illuminating Evan Miller's still form. His face was pale as winter snow, lips tinged blue. His chest, Sarah's fingers found his carotid artery, pressing deep, searching. 5 seconds. 10. Her expression shifted from hope to despair to something else entirely, shock. "I've got a pulse," she breathed, then louder. "I've got a pulse. It's thready. Maybe 30 beats per minute, but it's there." Rex let out a sound that was part howl, part scream, part triumph. But then his demeanor changed again. He began pawing at Evan's chest, specifically at the breast pocket of his burial suit, the same alert behavior he used for hidden drugs or explosives. Sarah ripped open the pocket and found it a small medical device, no bigger than a cigarette lighter, with a timer showing 1:47:23 and counting down. "What is that?" Grace gasped. Sarah's face went white as she recognized the device from a medical conference on assassination techniques. "It's an automated injection system. It's set to deliver a second dose of something in..." She looked at the timer. "Less than 2 hours." Nathan's grip on Harold tightened. "A second dose of what?" Harold had gone completely limp in Nathan's arms, his face a mask of defeat. The first dose was supposed to be enough, but the insurance required absolute certainty. The second dose... He looked at the timer ticking down. The second dose is irreversible. Rex placed his paws on the casket edge, his bloodied nails leaving prints on Evan's burial suit as he gently licked his unconscious owner's face, whimpering between each kiss. And deep in Evan's chest, hidden beneath layers of drugs and forced sleep, his heart struggled to beat faster, fighting against chemistry to return to the dog who refused to let him go. The timer read 1:46:58, 1:46:57, 1:46:56, 9:15 a.m. Sarah Williams ripped the automated injection device from Evan's pocket with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd removed hundreds of medical devices in trauma situations. The timer glowed red, 1:46:42. Her hands moved across Evan's body, checking for other devices, other traps. While Nathan Brooks held Harold Miller in a control hold that had the older man's face pressed against a pew. 911, what's your emergency? Grace Henderson's voice shook as she spoke into her phone. Riverside Memorial Chapel, 447 Oak Street. We have a man who was declared dead but is still alive. He's been drugged. We need paramedics immediately. Ma'am, can you repeat that? He was in a casket. The funeral was happening. But he's breathing. Please, just send everyone. The seal on the casket had broken with a soft pneumatic hiss, like the world exhaling a secret it couldn't hold anymore. Morning light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting Evan's pale face in fractured colors, blue across his closed eyes, gold on his hollow cheeks, red where his lips had gone cyanotic from lack of oxygen. Rex stood on his hind legs, front paws on the casket's edge, his whole body trembling with restraint. Every instinct screamed at him to jump in, to warm Evan with his body heat. But his training held him back. Don't contaminate the scene. Don't interfere with medical treatment. Wait for the professionals. But waiting was agony when every shallow breath from Evan's chest looked like it might be the last. Pulse is 32, Sarah announced, her fingers pressed to Evan's carotid. Breathing is 4 respirations per minute. He's in severe respiratory depression. Body temperature. She touched his forehead with the back of her hand. Cold. Maybe 94 degrees. This is professional. This is someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Maggie Henderson stood frozen, her funeral director's composure shattered. In all my years, I've prepared hundreds of bodies. The signs were all there, no pupil response, no apparent breathing, the lividity patterns. How did I miss? You didn't miss anything, Sarah interrupted. Whoever did this used a careful cocktail. Probably tetrodotoxin derivative to simulate death, combined with a paralytic to prevent movement, and a sedative to suppress consciousness. It's not something you'd find in a normal overdose. This was planned. Harold's voice came muffled from where Nathan held him. You don't understand. The estate goes to charity if he dies without children, $2 billion. But if he's incapacitated, mentally compromised from the drugs, I become permanent guardian as next of kin. He wasn't supposed to survive. Nathan's grip tightened. You tried to bury your nephew alive for money. Rex's whine cut through the accusation. He'd detected something new, his nose working frantically over Evan's chest, then his arms, then back to the pocket where the injection device had been. His alert bark was different this time, sharp, staccato, the pattern he used for multiple threats. Sarah followed his indication, carefully unbuttoning Evan's dress shirt. There, taped to his chest like a nicotine patch, were 3 more devices smaller, already empty. These have already deployed, she breathed. Look at the timestamps. 1 at the accident scene, 1 in the ambulance, 1 at the funeral home. She looked at Harold with horror. You've been dosing him repeatedly to maintain the death state. The distant sound of sirens grew louder. Rex's tail began to wag just slightly, recognizing the sound of help approaching, but then his demeanor changed. He began pawing at Evan's legs, specifically at his right ankle, his urgency increasing. What now? Maggie asked, her voice thin with shock. Sarah pulled up Evan's pant leg and found it an IV port, professionally placed, with a slow drip line connected to a small pump hidden in the lining of the casket. The clear fluid in the reservoir was nearly empty. Continuous infusion, she said. This is why he hasn't woken up despite our intervention. He's still being drugged right now. She traced the line to its source, finding the pump tucked beneath the silk lining. If I disconnect this wrong, it could send a fatal bolus dose. The timer on the main device read 1:44:23. "Where the hell did you get this equipment?" Nathan demanded. Harold's response was lost in the sudden chaos of EMTs bursting through the chapel doors. 2 paramedics, then 4, then a full emergency response team. The quiet funeral transformed into organized medical chaos, equipment cases slamming open, monitors beeping, orders being shouted. "What have we got?" The lead paramedic, a young man with steady hands, took in the scene. Open casket, blood on the wood from Rex's torn nails. Harold restrained. 22-year-old male, drugged with unknown cocktail meant to simulate death. Sarah rattled off. Pulse 32, respirations 4, temp approximately 94. Continuous IV infusion of unknown substance currently active. Automated injection system set to deploy second dose in. She glanced at the timer. 1 hour 43 minutes. Jesus Christ, the paramedic breathed. "Okay, we need to—" Rex's bark cut him off. The dog had positioned himself at Evan's head and was performing a specific alert pattern, nose to Evan's mouth, then to the paramedic, then back to Evan's mouth. The message was clear: airway problem. The paramedic immediately checked. Partial obstruction. There's something. He carefully opened Evan's mouth and extracted a small dissolvable tablet, half dissolved. Delayed release medication, probably meant to deploy after burial. "How many failsafes did you build into this murder?" Nathan asked Harold. Rex never moved from his position as the paramedics worked, his eyes tracking every movement, every medication administered, every vital sign on the portable monitors. When they prepared to move Evan to the gurney, Rex positioned himself at the foot, ready to follow. "Sir, the dog can't," one EMT started. "That dog is the only reason we found him alive." Sarah cut in. "He's a trained K9 officer. He comes with us." They lifted Evan onto the gurney with practiced precision. His chest rose and fell more visibly, now still shallow, but consistent. The cardiac monitor showed his heart rate climbing slowly, 35 to 38 in 41. But his eyes remained closed, his body limp, suspended between life and whatever Harold had tried to make him become. Rex followed the gurney step for step, his bloodied paws leaving prints on the chapel floor. As they passed the remaining mourners, Grace reached out to touch the dog's head. "Good boy," she whispered. "Good boy, Rex." At the ambulance, a new argument erupted. "We can't take the dog," the driver insisted. "Regulations." Rex solved the problem by jumping into the ambulance before anyone could stop him, positioning himself under the gurney where he wouldn't be in the way, but could maintain contact with Evan's dangling hand. Sarah climbed in beside them. "I'm a nurse. I'm coming too." The lead paramedic nodded, then looked at the timer still counting down in the evidence bag. 1:41:07. "What happens when that hits 0? He asked. Harold, being led to a police car, turned his head. "Potassium chloride," he said quietly. "Concentrated dose. Enough to stop his heart permanently. The receiver is implanted subdermally. I don't know where exactly." "The surgeon." "What surgeon?" Nathan demanded. But Harold had gone silent. His lawyers already on the phone, his plan unraveling, but his secret still held close. The ambulance doors began to close. Rex's nose found Evan's palm, and for just a moment so brief Sarah almost missed it. Evan's fingers twitched, trying to close around the familiar fur. The timer read 1:40:33. And somewhere in Evan's chest, a small device waited patiently to deploy its final, fatal dose. Riverside General Hospital ICU, the next 36 hours. The ICU at Riverside General had never seen anything like it. Rex lay beneath Evan's bed, his amber eyes tracking every blip on the monitors with the intensity of a sniper watching a target. He hadn't moved in 6 hours except to shift his head when nurses needed access to the equipment underneath. His breathing matched the ventilator's rhythm in when it pushed air into Evan's lungs, out when it released. Dr. Benjamin Chen, head of toxicology, stood at the foot of the bed studying charts that made less sense the more he read them. "In 30 years of medicine, I've never seen anything this sophisticated," he told Sarah, who'd refused to leave despite her own shift starting in 2 hours. Tetrodotoxin to simulate death, Vecuronium for paralysis, propofol for unconsciousness, all in carefully calibrated doses. But there's something else, something I can't identify. Rex's ears swiveled toward the doctor, but his eyes never left Evan's face. The young man lay still as stone, his skin translucent under the harsh hospital lights. The only signs of life were the mechanical rise of his chest and the weak but steady beep of the heart monitor, 52 beats per minute now, up from 30 but still dangerously low. The device, Sarah said, pointing to the evidence bag where the timer now read 000, safely passed its deadline thanks to the bomb squad who'd located and removed the subdural receiver from behind Evan's left ear. Whoever designed this had medical training. More than training, Dr. Chen corrected. This is expertise, PhD-level chemistry combined with surgical precision. Your uncle didn't do this alone. Through the ICU's glass walls, they could see the hallway filling with people. Word had spread through Riverside like wildfire the miracle dog who'd saved his owner from being buried alive. Grace Henderson sat in a wheelchair she didn't need, having convinced the nurses she was too weak to stand just so they'd let her stay. Nathan Brooks stood guard in his uniform, officially there to protect evidence but really watching Rex with the pride of one handler for another's partner. He needs to eat, a veterinary technician said, having been called in specifically for Rex. She'd brought premium dog food, Rex's favorite treats from the pet store, even a hamburger from the cafeteria. Rex didn't even turn his head. He won't, Nathan said quietly. Not until Evan wakes up. I've seen this before with K9s. When they're on a protection detail this intense, nothing else exists. Hour 12 brought unexpected visitors. 3 retired K9s and their handlers from across the state. Having heard about Rex through the police network, they filed in quietly, the dogs immediately understanding the gravity of the situation. Each approached Rex, touched noses briefly, a show of solidarity, then retreated. Their handlers left cards, flowers, and a folded American flag from the K9 Officers Association. That dog's a legend, one murmured to Nathan. 43 earthquake rescues, testified in 200 cases. And now this. He's earned his place in the Hall of Fame. Rex's tail moved once acknowledgement without breaking focus. Hour 18 brought the first real change. Evan's temperature had risen to 96 degrees. His heart rate touched 60. Dr. Chen began reducing the ventilator support, letting Evan's body remember how to breathe on its own. The drugs are metabolizing, he explained to the growing crowd of medical staff who'd come to witness the unprecedented case. But recovery from this level of chemical suppression, we're in uncharted territory. Rex must have sensed something because he stood for the first time since arrival, stretched his stiff legs, and placed his paws on the bed rail. His nose worked over Evan's hand, then his face, cataloging scents with the precision of a laboratory instrument. Whatever he detected made his tail wag just twice before he resumed his position. Did you see that? Sarah grabbed Dr. Chen's arm. Rex knows something. Hour 24 arrived with the sunset painting the ICU gold through the windows. The cafeteria had sent up food for everyone, maintaining vigil sandwiches that went mostly uneaten, coffee that was consumed by the gallon. Rex still hadn't touched food or water, though his eyes had begun to show the strain. Occasionally, his head would droop, then snap back up, fighting exhaustion with pure will. He can't keep this up, the vet tech warned. He's 11 years old. His body needs. Rex's sudden movement cut her off. He stood, alert, nose quivering. His tail went rigid, the same position he'd held at the funeral. Something had changed. On the monitor, Evan's brainwaves showed increased activity. Not consciousness, but something stirring beneath the chemical suppression. REM patterns flickered across the EEG like lightning in a distant storm. He's dreaming, Dr. Chen breathed. That's impossible with this level of sedation, but he's actually dreaming. Rex began to vocalize, not barking, but soft, encouraging whines. The sounds he'd made when Evan had nightmares at home. His paws came up on the bed rail again, and he gently licked Evan's fingers. the salt of tears mixing with antiseptic. Hour 30 brought Harold Miller's lawyer, who was immediately turned away by Nathan's stony presence. "Mr. Miller wants to know about his nephew's condition," the lawyer insisted. "Mr. Miller is being held on attempted murder charges," Nathan replied. "His concern is noted and rejected." Rex growled from under the bed, the first aggressive sound he'd made since arriving. Message-clear threats to Evan wouldn't be tolerated, even legal ones. Hour 36 arrived at 9 p.m. The ICU had taken on the quality of a shrine. Cards covered every surface. Flowers lined the windowsills despite hospital policy. Someone had brought Rex's bed from home and placed it beside Evan's bed, though the dog still wouldn't use it. The whole town seemed to be holding its breath. Dr. Chen performed his hourly assessment. Heart rate 72, temperature 98.1, breathing 16 respirations per minute without mechanical support. "We're going to try reducing the propofol," he announced. "See if he can surface on his own." Rex stood immediately, as if he'd understood every word. He positioned himself where Evan would see him first upon waking if he woke. The dog's amber eyes held such intensity that even the medical staff stepped back, recognizing something profound was happening. Sarah dimmed the lights to reduce stimulation. The monitors continued their electronic lullaby. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Then, so subtle that only Rex noticed at first, Evan's fingers moved. Not a twitch or reflex, but purposeful movement, searching. Rex pressed his head into Evan's palm, and the fingers found fur, tangling weakly but deliberately. On the EEG, consciousness flickered like a candle fighting wind. Evan's eyelids fluttered once, twice revealing glimpses of gray before closing again. "Evan," Sarah called softly. "Can you hear me? Rex is here. Rex is right here." The fingers in Rex's fur tightened. On the monitor, Evan's heart rate jumped to 85, then 90. His breathing pattern changed from mechanical to irregular, the body fighting to reclaim control from chemistry. Rex began to tremble, his exhausted body shaking with anticipation. 36 hours of vigilance, of refusing to believe the evidence of death, of holding on to hope when even the machines had said goodbye. It all came down to this moment. Evan's lips moved, no sound emerging, but the shape unmistakable to anyone watching Rex. The dog's response was immediate and heartbreaking, a sound between a howl and a sob that brought tears to every eye in the ICU. He pressed closer, his whole body vibrating with joy and relief and exhaustion. Dr. Chen leaned in with his penlight, checking pupil response. What he saw made him step back in shock. Evan's eyes weren't just responding to light, they were tracking it, following it with purpose. And when the light moved toward Rex, Evan's eyes followed until they found amber ones looking back. "Hello, boy," came the whisper, barely audible over the machines. But in that whisper, Rex heard everything: forgiveness for not preventing the accident, gratitude for not giving up, and the promise that they were still a pack, still a family, still breathing together in the darkness. Evan's eyes closed again, but his hand never let go of Rex's fur. And for the first time in 3 days, Rex's eyes began to close too, finally safe to rest. Then the seizure started. Second morning in ICU. The seizure lasted 43 seconds. 43 seconds where Rex transformed from exhausted guardian to battlefield medic, his training overriding everything. He barked once sharp, authoritative, alerting the medical staff, then positioned his body to prevent Evan from rolling off the bed while Dr. Chen rushed in with anticonvulsants. "Neurotoxin withdrawal," Dr. Chen explained as the medication took effect. "His brain is recalibrating after extreme suppression. This is actually a good sign. It means the higher functions are returning." Rex never panicked. His eyes remained locked on Evan's face as the tremor subsided. And when Evan's breathing steadied, the dog did something remarkable. He began to hum. A low, throaty vibration that wasn't quite a whine, wasn't quite a growl, but something ancient and comforting that seemed to reach into Evan's unconscious mind and anchor him. Sarah watched the monitors stabilize, Did he just sing Evan back? Canines sometimes vocalize to calm victims in distress, Nathan said from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. But I've never seen it done for someone the dog loves. That's not training. That's pure instinct. The sun broke through the clouds at 7:47 a.m., sending golden light across the ICU. It painted Rex's fur in shades of amber and gold, made Evan's pale skin look less corpse-like and more human. The light seemed to trigger something because Evan's eyes opened, not fluttering, not briefly, but completely, with full awareness. Rex. His voice was raw from the ventilator tube, but clear. What happened next would be talked about in Riverside for generations. Rex, who'd maintained perfect discipline for 40 hours, exploded into pure joy. His tail became a weapon of chaos, sending water pitchers flying, scattering charts across the floor, knocking over the IV pole, thankfully disconnected. He jumped, actually jumped despite his 11 years and arthritis, landing with his front paws on the bed, covering Evan's face with kisses while making sounds no one had ever heard from a dog before. Rex, buddy, can't breathe. Evan laughed, actually laughed, his hands coming up to hold the massive head as Rex continued his celebration. The cardiac monitor went crazy, not from distress but from Evan's heart rate jumping with happiness. Alarms blared, nurses rushed in. Dr. Chen tried to restore order. Rex didn't care. He'd found his person alive, conscious, and laughing. His tail destroyed a bouquet of flowers, sent cards flying like confetti, knocked Sarah's coffee across the floor. The ICU's strict, sterile environment became a festival of beautiful chaos. I need everyone to, Dr. Chen started, then stopped, watching Evan's vitals actually improve with each moment of Rex's ridiculous display. You know what? 5 more minutes. Grace Henderson began crying from her wheelchair. Nathan Brooks turned away to wipe his eyes. Sarah gave up all pretense of professional composure and sobbed openly. Even the ICU nurses, who'd seen everything, found themselves reaching for tissues. I heard you, Evan whispered when Rex finally calmed enough to settle beside him, the dog's head heavy on his chest. In the darkness, I heard you barking. You wouldn't let me go. Rex's tail thumped against the bed rail, confirmation, promise, devotion, all in one gesture. Mr. Miller, Dr. Chen said once the celebration calmed, I need to ask you some questions. Can you tell me what happened? Evan's expression changed, memory flooding back. The accident, my brakes failed. But it wasn't an accident. Uncle Harold was there so fast. Too fast. And the paramedics. He frowned, struggling to piece together fragments. They weren't real paramedics, were they? We don't think so, Nathan confirmed. Real paramedics were dispatched but called off, told it was a false alarm. Whoever Harold hired intercepted you first. The injection. Evan's hand went to his neck where a small puncture mark remained. Someone said something about making it look good, and then everything went dark. But not unconscious dark, aware dark. I could hear things, feel things, but couldn't move, couldn't speak. Rex whined, pressing closer. He'd known, somehow, he'd known Evan was trapped inside his own body. I remember the funeral home, Evan continued, his voice stronger now. Voices discussing timing, dosages. Uncle Harold saying something about the inheritance, about how if I was mentally impaired from oxygen deprivation, he'd get guardianship. He wasn't trying to kill me, not exactly. He wanted me vegetative, alive but not living. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. That's even worse than murder. But he didn't count on Rex. Evan's fingers found the dog's ears, scratching the spot that always made Rex's back leg twitch. My guardian angel with 4 paws and bad breath. Rex huffed indignantly at the breath comment, making everyone laugh, real laughter, healing laughter, the kind that comes after surviving something that should have been unsurvivable. Dr. Chen performed a full neurological exam, testing reflexes, cognitive function, memory. It's remarkable, he said. By all rights, You should have severe brain damage from the oxygen deprivation alone. But your numbers are perfect. How? The cold, Sarah realized suddenly. The drugs lowered his body temperature. Cold protects the brain during oxygen deprivation. It's why people can sometimes be revived after drowning in frozen lakes. Harold's sophisticated murder plan actually saved him, Nathan marveled. The very drugs meant to fake his death protected his brain from the damage that should have resulted. Evan tried to sit up, Rex immediately supporting him with his body. Where is Harold now? County jail, Nathan reported. Charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and about 12 other things. He's already lawyered up, but with your testimony, the drug evidence, and the fact that we have everything on video from the chapel, he's going away for a long time. The money, Evan said quietly. $2 billion. That's what this was about. My parents' life insurance, their investments, the tech company they founded. All of it would go to charity if I died without children. But Harold found a loophole if I was alive but incapacitated. He'd become my guardian and control everything. Which Rex growled at Harold's name, a reminder that some sins weren't forgivable, even if Evan survived them. There's more, Dr. Chen said carefully. We found evidence of long-term planning. Your parents' accident 2 years ago, the police are reopening that case. The brake lines on their car. The timing of Harold being named alternate beneficiary just weeks before. Evan's face crumpled. Rex immediately shifted, laying his full weight across Evan's lap, grounding him with presence and warmth. He killed them too. We don't know yet, Nathan said gently, but we're going to find out. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of monitors and Rex's breathing. Then Evan straightened, something hardening in his eyes, not vengeance, but determination. I want to see him, Evan said. Harold, I want to look him in the eyes and ask why. That's not advisable, Dr. Chen started. I died, Evan interrupted. For 40 minutes at the accident scene, I was technically dead. Then I was actually buried in a casket while still breathing. I've earned the right to ask why. Rex stood, shaking himself off. Then looked at Dr. Chen with an expression that clearly said, we're doing this whether you approve or not. Sarah was already getting a wheelchair. Nathan was calling the jail to arrange a supervised visit. Grace was muttering about justice and righteousness. The entire ICU seemed to hold its breath, waiting. One more thing, Evan said as they prepared to transfer him to the wheelchair. That surgeon Harold mentioned the one who implanted the devices. We need to find them, because if they did this to me, they've done it to others, Nathan finished grimly. We're already investigating 3 suspicious deaths in the last year. Similar circumstances, young, wealthy, sudden accidents, quick funerals. Rex's ears went flat against his head. He moved to the window, looking out at the parking lot below, his body language shifting to high alert. In the distance, barely visible, a black sedan sat idling, the same type that had been at the police station 2 years ago when Evan first adopted Rex. The dog's low growl said everything. This isn't over. This isn't. 6 months later, Riverside Police K-9 Memorial Garden. The golden hour sun transformed the memorial garden into something from a painting. Each blade of grass outlined in amber, the granite monuments glowing like warm stones. Rex sat at perfect attention, his coat brushed to silk, the metal around his neck catching the light and throwing it back in small starbursts. The Congressional Medal of Valor, the first ever awarded to a retired K-9, hung heavy with significance. Evan Miller stood beside him, no longer the hollow-eyed boy who'd walked into a kennel 2.5 years ago, no longer the victim who'd nearly been buried alive. At 22, he carried himself with the quiet strength of someone who'd seen the darkness and chosen to become light instead. His hand rested on Rex's head, feeling the gentle tremor of age in the dog's body, the arthritis that had worsened during those 40 hours of vigilance. Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Patricia Williams spoke into the microphone, her voice carrying across the crowd of nearly 300 people officers, K-9 handlers, survivors Rex had rescued over his career, and citizens of Riverside who'd followed the story. We gather today not just to honor a dog, but to celebrate what happens when loyalty meets love, when training meets devotion, when one soul refuses to give up on another. Rex's tail remained still, professional even now, but Evan felt the slight lean of the dog's weight against his leg, their secret signal that meant I'm here. We're okay. The other retired canines sat in a semicircle behind them: Kaiser, Bella, Thor, Duchess, all gray-muzzled warriors whose bodies had given everything to the job. Their handlers stood proudly, many wiping tears as Chief Williams continued. Officer Rex, badge number 247, served with distinction for 9 years, 43 earthquake rescues, 200 court testimonies, countless drug seizures. But 6 months ago, he performed his greatest service not as a police dog, but as a friend who knew the difference between death and something pretending to be death. The medal ceremony was swift and dignified. Rex stood as the medal was placed around his neck, his training holding despite his obvious exhaustion from standing so long. The crowd erupted in applause, and for once, Rex's tail broke protocol, wagging with the pure joy of being recognized, being seen, being valued beyond his service years. Then came Evan's moment. He stepped to the microphone, pulling out a check that fluttered in the evening breeze. $2 million made out to the Rex Foundation for Canine Retirement Care. My parents left me wealth I never asked for, Evan said, his voice steady and clear. Wealth that someone was willing to kill for. But Rex taught me what real wealth is. It's having someone who won't give up on you, even when the whole world says you're gone. Today, I'm establishing the Rex Foundation to ensure no retired canine ever faces euthanasia due to lack of funds for care. Every dog who's given their body to service deserves dignity in retirement. Nathan Brooks led the applause this time, remembering that day in the kennel when Rex had 30 days left before being put down. Now, because of the foundation, 17 retired canines had already been placed in homes, their medical care guaranteed for life. Sarah Williams, now Evan's girlfriend. Their relationship forged in those ICU hours brought forward the foundation's first beneficiary, a 10-year-old German Shepherd named Scout, missing a leg from a bomb detection gone wrong, scheduled for euthanasia next week before the foundation intervened. Scout's new family, a retired couple named George and Eleanor, cried openly as they signed the adoption papers. Now, Chief Williams said, Mr. Miller has asked to say something about forgiveness. The crowd grew quiet. Everyone knew Harold Miller had been sentenced to 25 years. His surgeon accomplice, Dr. Marcus Webb, to 30. The investigation had revealed 4 other victims, all young heirs, all nearly buried alive, though none had survived except Evan. Harold was family, Evan said simply. He killed my parents for money. He tried to bury me alive for money. The court has given him justice, and I won't interfere with that. But I've chosen to forgive him not for his sake, but for mine. Rex taught me that holding on to hatred is like poisoning yourself. Dogs don't do revenge. They do loyalty, protection, and love. I'm learning to be more like my dog. Rex looked up at him, and Evan could swear the old dog smiled. The ceremony concluded as the sun touched the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and rose. The crowd began to disperse, but not before each retired canine was given a medal of service, each handler a certificate of appreciation. Rex touched noses with each dog, a senior officer acknowledging his troops one last time. Grace Henderson, now 80 and still spry, approached with a basket. I brought dinner, she said. Figured you two might want to eat here, watch the sunset properly. And so they did. Evan, Rex, Sarah, Nathan, Grace, and a dozen others, spreading blankets in the memorial garden as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. Rex got the first piece of roasted chicken, then the second, then the third, until Evan laughingly declared him officially spoiled. He's earned it, Nathan said, watching Rex demolish a 4th piece. That dog gave everything to the job, then gave even more to you. He deserves all the chicken in the world. As darkness fell and the crowd finally dispersed, Evan and Rex walked home the same route they'd taken every morning for 2 years, past the spot where Evan's car had crashed, past the funeral home where everything had nearly ended, past the hospital where everything had begun again. They reached their porch as the first stars appeared. Rex climbed the steps slowly, his joints protesting, but his tail still wagging. Evan helped him onto the old couch they'd moved outside for exactly this purpose, watching the world go by, together, alive, breathing in synchronization. "You know what Mom would say?" Evan asked, scratching behind Rex's ears. "She'd say we were meant to find each other. That sometimes the universe puts two broken things together so they can become whole." Rex's response was a contented sigh, his head dropping onto Evan's lap with complete trust. In the distance, a siren wailed another emergency, another chance for some K-9 team to save a life. But Rex's working days were done. He'd earned his rest, earned his peace, earned this quiet moment on a porch with the human he'd refused to let die. Sarah arrived with hot chocolate and a blanket. Grace called from next door about Sunday dinner plans. And life ordinary, precious, continuing life wrapped around them like a blessing. The last photo ever taken of Rex would be from this night, an old dog and his young human on a porch swing, sharing a piece of pie, the Medal of Valor set aside, forgotten, because the real honor was simpler than that. The real honor was still breathing, still together, still watching the world turn from dark to light and back again. Rex would live another 18 months, dying peacefully in his sleep at 13. Evan's hand on his head, their breathing synchronized one last time. The Rex Foundation would go on to save over 300 retired canines, each one a testament to a dog who knew the difference between death and something pretending to be death, who knew that love doesn't end with a heartbeat, and who proved that sometimes the greatest acts of service happen after the badge comes off. But that was still to come. Tonight, there was just a porch, a swing, a dog and his human, and the quiet miracle of drawing breath after breath after breath. Together. A letter from the storyteller. Dear friend, I need to tell you something about Riverside, about what happened after the cameras left and the headlines faded. You see, when a town discovers it's been harboring a monster, not one, but two something breaks in the collective soul. Dr. Marcus Webb had lived among us for 15 years. He'd delivered babies, treated our elderly, sat in the third pew at St. Mary's every Sunday. Harold Miller had sponsored Little League teams, donated to the library, smiled at church potlucks. How do you reconcile that the hands that saved your child's life also slowly murdered 4 young people for money? I was there that day in the chapel. I'm Maggie Henderson, the funeral director who almost buried Evan Miller alive. My hands have prepared over 3,000 bodies in 40 years, and I never once questioned whether they were truly dead. That haunts me. What haunts me more is that I liked Harold. I'd laughed at his jokes at Rotary Club meetings. I'd trusted Dr. Webb with my husband's heart medication. The truth is, evil doesn't announce itself with fangs and darkness. It comes wearing familiar faces, offering condolences, shaking hands with practiced warmth. It sits beside you at grief's most vulnerable moment and calculates the price of your sorrow. But here's what I learned from Rex and why I'm telling you this story. That dog didn't see Harold's expensive suit or Dr. Webb's medical degrees. He smelled the wrongness beneath their cologne and credentials. Animals know what we've forgotten, that truth lives in the body, in the chemical signatures of deceit, in the pheromones of malice that no amount of social polish can mask. After Evan's rescue, our town went through something like group therapy without calling it that. We gathered at Grace's house, she of the endless casseroles and fierce protectiveness, and talked about the signs we'd missed. Harold's too quick arrival at family tragedies, Dr. Webb's unexplained wealth despite a modest practice, the young heirs who'd died suddenly. Their funerals rushed, their estates quickly dispersed. We chose not to see, Grace said one evening, her weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug, because seeing would mean admitting that someone we knew, someone we trusted, was capable of such calculated cruelty. Sarah Williams, the nurse who'd felt Evan's impossible pulse, put it differently. We're trained to trust systems, medical systems, legal systems, social systems. But Rex operated outside all systems. He just knew his person needed him. The trials revealed everything. Dr. Webb had developed the drug cocktail during legitimate research into suspended animation for surgical procedures. Harold had found him through connections at a pharmaceutical company. Together, they had identified targets young people with large inheritances, no immediate family, and most critically, no dogs. Because dogs, they'd learned from their first failed attempt, could detect the difference between death and chemical suspension. 4 victims before Evan. 4 young people buried alive. Their bodies never autopsied because Dr. Webb signed the death certificates. They didn't survive their second doses, administered by timer-controlled devices while they lay in their graves. I prepared 2 of those bodies. I dressed them, positioned them, never knowing they might have still been breathing. This is my confession, I failed them. We all did. But Rex was pure purpose without compromise. He didn't care about proper procedures or social embarrassment or whether his behavior was appropriate for a funeral. He knew one thing: Evan was alive, and nothing else mattered. Nathan Brooks, who'd handled canines for 15 years, told me something that changed how I see everything. Dogs don't lie to themselves the way humans do. They can't rationalize away their instincts. When Rex alerted, he was saying what we couldn't: something is deeply wrong here. And I will not participate in this wrongness. The Rex Foundation isn't just about saving retired police dogs, though it does that beautifully. It's about remembering that loyalty and truth can't be bought, negotiated, or rationalized away. It's about honoring the part of us that knows, really knows, when something isn't right. I still prepare bodies. But now, I check differently. I wait longer. I listen to the families who say something seems wrong, even when all the paperwork is perfect. I've installed monitoring equipment that can detect the faintest heartbeat, the slightest breath. I'll never unknowingly bury someone alive again. And I got a dog, a retired canine named Mercy, half-blind and fully arthritic, who sleeps in my funeral home's office. She's never alerted to anything more dramatic than a mouse in the wall. But her presence reminds me daily there are truths beyond what we choose to see. And sometimes it takes a creature who can't lie to show us what we've been hiding from ourselves. Evan forgave Harold. I'm still working on forgiving myself. But Rex never needed to forgive because he never lost faith in the first place. He just did what love does: refuses to give up, refuses to accept the convenient story, refuses to let go even when the whole world says it's time. That's the real secret. Friend. Not that evil hid among us, evil always does. But that grace often comes on 4 legs, wearing fur, speaking in barks and whines, and the absolute refusal to abandon what the heart knows is true. Every sunset now, I see them, Evan and Rex, on their porch, sharing silence and chicken scraps. The young man who survived being buried alive and the old dog who wouldn't let him go. They wave. I wave back. And for a moment, the world makes sense again. Not because the darkness is gone, it never truly goes, but because the light, when it comes, is so fierce and loyal and true that the darkness simply has no place to stand. This is what Rex taught us. Love doesn't need words or wealth or even breathing room. It just needs the courage to keep believing when everyone else has already said goodbye. Thank you for listening to this story. May you find your own Rex, or better yet, may you be someone else's. The one who refuses to give up when giving up would be so much easier, with hope and haunting truth. Margaret Maggie Henderson, Funeral Director, Riverside Memorial Chapel. Keeper of one last secret: sometimes the dead aren't dead, and sometimes a dog knows better than us all.